respect women when I'm on a date. I take them to the park or maybe a museum.
Yeah, feel it.
Yeah, I do feel it.
Yeah, that's right. This is Nerd Thug Radio, and that is Will Smith.
It's not really Will Smith.
No,
I
it's
think
really
we
not.
need to
It's not,
clarify.
yeah. That's Will Smith being made fun of on Family Guy for being safe rap.
It is a very accurate representation of Will Smith.
It is. Will Smith, he actually only recently has started to kind of curse and kind of adult a little bit, but I think it's because his kids now are also like 15 and 18 and have their own albums and whatever. Will Smith is the greatest rapper alive. That's actually been documented, and it's something we say regularly on this show. And we are living in the millennium.
You say it.
Yeah, that's
Don't
what
make
makes
it like
official.
it's the opinion of the show.
So this is Nerd Thug Radio. I'm Corey DLG, and the guy stupidly arguing with me is Zach Attack. We got Nico back there on the board.
Yeah, I'm here.
Keeping us running. And what I want to... it's time for Nerd Thug Media around the world. And we're going to start off with the fact that the greatest rapper alive, one of the most important acting institutions in all of America, Will Smith, has a movie.
Yeah.
Bright.
On Netflix.
Debuted this weekend, so it's out right now. So
I haven't
when
gotten
you're
a
tired
chance
of
to
Grandma
watch
and
it yet.
Grandpa, put it on.
I haven't gotten a chance to watch it yet, so if you have...
No, I haven't yet, but...
I'm really excited about
Here's
it.
what's important about it. It's a $90 million Netflix action movie, and they got the most important movie star in the entire world to be in it, Will Smith. And so what's happening right now, Rotten Tomatoes has kind of been overrun with, like, the trolls.
Has it?
Yeah, a little bit.
I haven't been on it in a long time.
So when Justice League came out, there's a pretty strong controversy that the critics killed Justice League via Rotten Tomatoes. What did it debut at, Nico? It was like a 30% or something crazy like that.
I don't remember. I wasn't following Rotten Tomatoes.
It debuted pretty brutally to the critics' score. The critics' meta score was not good. And therefore, the fan response was slow, is what the studio said. The studio said that essentially Rotten Tomatoes kind of killed the Justice League's American release. It took them about 4 weeks to actually break even domestically. Internationally, they still cleaned up. They still did well. It was still a
isn't that
successful
often
movie.
the case with like any kind of critic? Like, why is Rotten Tomatoes suddenly given more weight than any other critic platform? And I get why I like Rotten Tomatoes better as a critical platform.
I feel like you're answering your question then.
But couldn't studios make the same argument anytime a critic says a movie is bad?
Well, over time they have. Terminator famously was given 2 thumbs down by Hansel and Gretel, whoever those two guys were back then. Philbin and Morris. Yeah, those guys. Anyway, they gave a lot of important movies 2 thumbs down back then, and the studios would reply a lot of times, And Arnold Schwarzenegger, I don't think ever got a thumbs up from one of the 2 of them. And
he's a terrible actor,
right? But he's made a lot of commercially successful movies,
and he's done a lot of great movies. He has a lot of good roles for himself,
right? And I think that's really all that like. A movie isn't always going to be an art thing. It's not always going to be an action thing. Some movies are going to be whatever they're going to be.
Right.
You're making whatever you want to make.
Right.
So when the critics jump on something, it might just be they don't get it. And Justice League isn't supposed to be a quality
But fair enough. But you have to assume that people who are critics of movies do get movies, right?
Overall, yes, but they do miss them occasionally. Like Terminator came out to. I mean, it got panned nationwide. Got panned, and then it still debuted at whatever.
And I think Terminator was a good movie, but was it a great movie?
Considering the response to it and the fan build up, and it's never gone away. How many have they made now?
Yeah, and it speaks to fans like us, but I wouldn't, even being a fan of that kind of movie, I wouldn't put it in the same league as like really great movies. Like I wouldn't put it in the same categories like The Godfather.
So you're saying like artistically, you wouldn't?
I don't even mean artistically.
Okay, so then,
I don't think it's as good a movie as The Godfather.
But why would you? But why would you? I guess I don't know. Like I wouldn't compare those two. Like if somebody was like compare Godfather to the Terminator, I would be like, why?
They're both movies though.
But that's about as far as you compare them. Like one's a time traveling robot.
No, that's true.
Stop his own timeline from existing.
Here's what I think though. I take the word, and I don't make my decisions to see movies on this, but critics to me are a better indicator of how the things that are strong and weak about a movie. Maybe not necessarily. I don't decide whether or not I see a movie based on the critic giving it a letter score.
Right.
But based on what certain critics will say or what I read about movies, I take that as a much better indicator of the strength of a movie than I do box office dollars.
So you do?
Yeah, absolutely.
So like if a movie does like...
Because I think a lot of movies people will go to see because it's
regardless
the movie
of the quality.
See. Right.
Okay. All right. No, and that's probably true to an extent.
Right.
And there's probably no correlation between box office dollars and quote unquote good movies.
Right.
But good movies has got to be a subjective concept.
It is. So that's and I used to struggle with critics of movies, and I used to write quite a bit of, like when I wrote for the newspaper in college, I wrote quite a bit of critiques. But you have to find a critic who who is in line with some of the things you like, or
So
who
who thinks like
identify,
you.
maybe not necessarily thinks like you do, but identifies things in movies that you like. So I like for example, if I was to like set pieces or soundtrack, if those things were important to me, find a critic that always comments on those things
and then roll with them.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, that's fair.
But box office dollars, like for example, especially with things like, because Netflix type movies where they're dumping a bunch of major motion picture movies now onto Netflix, like how are you going to check box office dollars for that?
Well, that's the thing. Okay, so that's kind of Justice League was a theater release. Warner Brothers as a studio though essentially blamed critics' criticisms for the weak start and then the slow release and then the poor. I say poor outcome. I think it still did over $700 million, $800 million, but it was a long run to get there. It wasn't the quick hike they thought it would be. It was the marathon. And then in the flip side of that, The Last Jedi, strong critic score, low fanfare score on
Really?
Rotten Tomatoes. The fanfare score is about 50% for The Last Jedi.
Really?
Yeah,
That's surprising to me.
having seen it, I enjoyed the movie, so I am surprised at the result. However, my ear to the street, I've heard a ton of the criticism. The internet is split pretty evenly on this movie.
A lot of people, I think, went into that movie expecting to have a lot of questions answered.
Yeah, they do leave some things unanswered.
That they did either get answered, but not in a way that was relevant,
Right.
or didn't get answered at all.
So, just kind of the flip side, the critics like this movie. It did about $600 million worldwide in its opening weekend.
Justice League?
No, Last Jedi.
Last Jedi.
So in its first week, it did about $600 million, where versus it took Justice League about a month to get to the $600 million mark. And they're saying the difference is the critics' support.
But I don't even think that's true. Like, Star Wars is gonna bang up, do a cleanup job on opening weekend.
But Star
right?
Wars,
Right.
but the Star Wars movies have been on par essentially with the big superhero movies, not the individual ones, but like the Avengers. The Avengers ones, the Batman vs Superman was monetarily $1 billion
Right.
movie.
It's like good movies attract people.
No,
And
but
no,
Justice League-
it's like good movies attract people, and then the build up to the Justice League movie was disastrous, and it wasn't good.
Right, and so that's the criticism. The Justice League movie should have fit into that group. It should have been one of those movies. It should have been Batman vs Superman. It should have been Avengers or Avengers 2.
But Batman, how did Batman and Superman do?
It wound up doing over $1 billion. I believe it's one of the top grossing movies.
Right, but how did it do
you wanna check that,
opening out?
Nico?
I don't know. I first of all, I feel like if Star Wars only does as well as the Avengers, something's wrong.
No, because I think the Avengers are doing pretty close to, like, they're doing in the 800 to 900 million.
But
So how
that's what
much better than that do you think you're going to get?
I think with Star Wars, like,
At this point, considering they're saying they're going to do a Star Wars every year, you don't think that waters it down somewhat?
I don't know, man. I think that lowers the bar. I think the Avengers brought a lot of people into the comic book movie realm, but Star Wars has carried its fan base since the 70s, right? So if for Star Wars only to do as well as a big Avengers movie, I think something's wrong.
But aren't you kind of looking at that the flip side? Like, Avengers is doing as well as franchises that have existed for 30 years.
Right, and I think it's commendable for the Avengers. Don't get me wrong, but I think it's a problem for Star Wars. Star Wars should have done wildly better.
See, I think in my head, the way I'm categorizing, what do you got? What's the number?
So Batman vs Superman is about sitting at a 872 million. The first Avengers is 1.5 billion.
Okay, so here's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about event movies that when they make them, they're willing to spend $200 to $400 million because they know they're going to get back to that 800. They're going to at least double their money, right? They expect to because it's a big event movie.
Right.
We're going to have Batman fight Superman. That's an event. We're going to combine characters who have now started at that point in 5 individual movies. We're going
Right.
to shove them together in one movie.
Right.
That's an event movie.
Right.
So we're going to bring back Star Wars for the first time in 20 years or 10 years at this point.
Right.
That's an event movie.
Agreed.
So to me, these are all big events.
Right, those are big events, but also if you look back, Iron Man 3 did $1.2 billion, and that's not a super huge, disastrous event movie that hasn't happened in 20 years.
And it came off the terrible Iron Man 2.
But the flip side of that is Iron Man in and of itself, he essentially is the reason why there's even a Marvel universe.
That's fair.
Robert Downey Jr. and Iron Man is the reason the rest of it even exists. So I kind of feel like he gets put off to the side because the Batman movies did the same thing.
I think they
Right? The Dark Knight should be up there as well.
But here's the thing about Justice League versus the Avengers. People had a long time to whet their appetite with individual movies that were solid on their own, money-wise or critic-wise, either way, before the Avengers event movie came out.
Well,
JLA didn't have that.
Right. And honestly...
And I haven't seen Justice League, but I don't like... First of all, I didn't think Batman v Superman was any good.
Yeah, it was.
There were things about it that I liked, but I think it was a good movie.
Overall, it wasn't. I agree with you.
And I saw the Superman with Amy Adams. I don't know who plays Superman, but Amy Adams plays
Henry
Lois
Cavill.
Lane. I thought that was an okay movie.
That's
but
Man of Steel.
It wasn't a good Superman movie, and it wasn't a good build to.
It wasn't the
They
right.
jumped into Justice League. To me, it felt like they jumped to Justice League because they had to get something out there to compete with Avengers as far as an event movie.
And I feel like
they introduced how many new characters in Justice League?
a lot.
Right.
And
has that
poorly.
happened in a single Avengers movie?
No.
The only new character in the Avengers movies has been the villain.
The villain, and then like whatever the feature, like the story of that character. So like Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver, and Ultron are kind of all linked together. So I agree with you. I do think part of the relevancy of all of that though is that Marvel has done this. They haven't had to deal with quote unquote making a bad movie. Iron Man 2 is probably the worst one, and that one still did $600 to $700 million.
Right.
And it didn't stop the train; it started the train. That was the beginning of Phase 2.
Right.
And they didn't even blink. To me, DC and Warner Brothers as a whole have kind of been playing catch up, and that's sort of the issue that comes back to the critics and Rotten Tomatoes. And for coming all the way full circle back to the greatest actor alive, Will Smith, in the millennium that we live in, Rotten Tomatoes is hurting Bright right now. They're saying that Bright is at like the 30% mark currently. I haven't seen it myself, so I want to judge for myself. The premise of the movie is interesting. It's a modern day world where fantasy creatures all are mashed together, and Will Smith is a cop with the first orc on the police force.
Yeah.
There are elves and fairies.
It's going to be a great movie.
I'm intrigued.
But here's the thing: with the critic score at 30% and no box office revenues,
How do you determine if it's a success? Well,
like
Netflix,
you and I are going to watch
has
it.
we will. Netflix though has the advantage of they internally at least get to see how many people watch it.
That's
they may
fair.
never tell us.
That's fair.
But they'll at least internally they'll know if people watch it.
But people who look and make decisions on what movies to see are either going to look at critics or dollars, right?
Right.
That's how they make a decision.
Right.
And they've automatically been cut off from half of those numbers.
You're right. So that is a new era, and that actually gives more strength to the critics.
Yeah, and you look at the Amazon movies too. That movie Big Sick that came out in theaters but was an Amazon movie and it was available on Prime almost immediately afterwards.
Right.
This is a new era we're entering.
We actually are living in the millennium, and the millennials are making the decisions, and we're going to get out to a break. When we come back, we got more Nerd Thug Radio just for you. That's right, just for you.
Critics be damned.